tariffs are still on the docket, of course, as we talked about Epstein, and then this bill that's passed, which of course is directly connected to what they're doing with the economy, of course, with these tariffs. But sometimes these tariffs that Donald Trump is implementing have to do with his grudges and his buddies in other countries, and has nothing to do with the economy.
Let me ask you about one new set of tariffs that he announced on Brazil. 50% new tariff on Brazil. Brazil had a $6.8 billion surplus last year. In fact, the U.S. hasn't had a trade deficit with Brazil since 2007. I mean, almost 2 decades. So why are we putting a punishing 50% tariff on Brazil?
Well, bottom line is the president has been very frustrated with negotiations with Brazil and also with the actions of Brazil. In the end, though, we're trying to put America first. I think that a lot of people, when I'm talking to negotiators from other countries, at some point they'll say, what did we do wrong? And what I'm trying to get, the message we're all trying to get across is this is about America getting itself ready for the golden age by getting our house in order, by getting our tariff and trade policy and tax policy exactly where it needs to be for a golden age. And normally it's not necessarily about a specific country, but with Brazil it is. Their actions have shocked the president at times, and he's made them clear about that.
But I don't understand how you're saying it's about America, because the president has made it quite clear that what he's upset about is how the Brazilian Supreme Court has handled the criminal case involving former President Bolsonaro.
I'm agreeing with you. What I'm saying is that what I've been saying with most countries was that it's really about us getting the tariffs in order. And I think that this tariff for Brazil is a lot higher because of the president's frustration with Bolsonaro. And the fact that Bolsonaro himself, anyway.
But can you explain to me, because I find it confusing here, on what authority does the president have to impose tariffs on a country because he doesn't like what that country's judicial system is handling a specific case?
Well,
I mean, how
if
is
he
that?
thinks it's a national defense emergency, or if he thinks it's a national security threat, that he has the authority under IEPA.
So how is it a national security threat that, how Brazil is handling a criminal case against its former president?
Well, that's not the only thing. That's not the only thing. I mean,
so what is it? I mean, I've asked what it is. I mean, it seems that that's what President Trump's talking about. He's talking about his anger and his frustration. He's been quite candid about it with the Bolsonaro case.
Right. Well, the bottom line is that what we're doing absolutely collectively across every country is we're onshoring production in the U.S. to reduce the national emergency that is that we have a massive trade deficit that's putting it at risk should we need production in the U.S. because of a national security crisis. And this is part of an overall strategy to do that.
But again, as we've just established, we have a trade surplus with Brazil, not a deficit. And we've had a surplus with Brazil for 18 years.
Did you guys hear an answer anywhere in Kevin Hassett's response and back and forth with John Carl, who did an excellent job, by the way, finally asking questions until he doesn't get the answer, or it's very clear that this guy doesn't have one, or the ones that he has don't make any sense? I think it was pretty clear, and it went long. I wanted to let that whole thing roll because you have to see how far and how desperate these guys are to make sure that they cover and make sure that this comes off as completely different than what it really is. So in case you guys hadn't heard, one of those new countries that Trump threatened a new tariff on, up to 50% on Brazil, is not based in all the things that they keep talking about.
This morning, a major escalation in President Trump's global trade war, with the president releasing a letter announcing a 50% tariff on imports from Brazil starting August 1st. Mr. Trump specifically pointing to the ongoing prosecution of one of his longtime allies, Brazil's former president Jair Bolsonaro. A show of support for the far-right politician who's been barred for running for office in Brazil this decade and is facing charges for an alleged coup to overturn his 2022 election loss.
I thought he's going after all the countries that made it so unfair for the United States to do business. It's not the case here. And of course, Hassett then has to admit some of those points, because he did have to point out, well, he's unhappy with the way that they're doing things in that country. Who the hell made you the president of Brazil, or I guess the overseer of Brazil, or maybe the judicial branch over Brazil, to where you have to implement tariffs that are punishable on the U.S. economy and, consumers here, because you're upset about them prosecuting the guy who did the same thing you did when you lost an election. So as that's going down, and we've heard nothing consistent. We've heard nothing about the way that the inflation will then be affected by these tariffs. That is until No. Inflation accelerated in June as Trump's tariffs started to leave a bigger imprint on the economy, keeping the Federal Reserve on track to hold interest rates steady when policymakers meet next month. So the consumer price index rose 2.7% from a year ago, the swiftest pace since February. That's data that's been released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics that showed just today. This is slightly higher than expected and is up from an annual pace of 2.4% in May. So core inflation, which strips out volatile food and energy prices and is seen as a reliable gauge for underlying price pressures, also shifted higher. Those prices were up 2.9% from the same time last year. As we've seen consistently over and over and over again, these guys, similar to Kevin Hassett, were talking about how inflation is going to have nothing to do with tariffs. It's not like prices go up. I mean, prices go up a little bit, but then maybe not. But once the news then broke out, here's what Scott Besson, who's always been on many television shows to tout this agenda and these tariff policies as something great. But now that the inflation started, I want you guys to see how he's shifted his tone and moved those goalposts.
I wouldn't put too much emphasis on one number. I think it's the trend. And I think one thing that Wall Street, a lot of economists, market in general got wrong early on was that tariffs were going to cause a substantial price level rise, which just hasn't happened.
A substantial price increase, but it just hasn't happened. Substantial. Substantial to who? I've noticed prices going up. I've noticed gas prices in my area have gone up 60 cents. So I'm just curious. That's significant. Just gonna let you, in case you didn't know that. That's a significant amount. But a significant amount of price increase is different for this billionaire here. That's the difference. They think that because they can handle these price increases that you can, or I'm sorry, more like because they can handle price increases and you can't, they don't give a damn. But still, back in June, he was touting how none of this is going to be a problem at all. Remember this?
Reality is there will either be less inventory or things at higher prices or both.
When we were here in March, you said there was going to be big inflation. There hasn't been any inflation. Actually, the inflation numbers are the best in 4 years. So why don't we stop trying to say this could happen and wait and see what does happen?
Rich people that aren't affected so badly by this can wait and see what does happen when economists and folks who know how trends work and how when you implement these tariffs, how they will work. So it's not, they keep breaking this down to, are you rooting for America or are you rooting against it? I'm rooting for it because I live here and then that's going to affect my bottom line. So since we predicted and saw the way things work and told you not to do it that way because it'll work against us, it's why don't you just wait and see if your life is screwed up. Well, similarly with all these policies where they're dismantling the federal government, when we wait and see how the policies affect people, many times people die. Let's wait and see how many people are booted off of Medicare, Medicaid, and then how many people die. Let's wait and see before we then determine that the decision to do that would result in people's deaths. They don't care. So who is the collateral damage for us to wait and see whether or not the things are going to happen? By the way, it's Tuesday. Those things are happening. And the same guy who said wait and see said it's not good enough for me to give a damn yet. I can't talk about the past promises that were made without going to Howard Lutnick, who's over the top in the way that he was pushing this. This is back in March even.
You made one comment. So inflation comes from a government printing more money. Some prices can rise. This bottle of water.
It can't happen at all.
No, tariffs do not. Tariffs do not create inflation. Printing money creates inflation. You have a balanced budget. There can't be inflation. It doesn't mean one product could be more expensive and one product could be less expensive. But China, I'll give you an example. China has the highest tariffs in the world. In the world. Everything gets tariffed in China, and they don't have inflation. In fact, they have deflation. Why does China tariff everything, and we give them a free ride back here? And they subsidize the opioid production. They subsidize opioid production.
If all else fails, go to some fear tactics. But no, as he said. There's no way. There's no way these tariffs cause inflation. Weird that he says that as it's now causing inflation. I wonder if he's going to come out and say something different. I haven't seen anything yet. There's more of Howard Lutnick. I'm sorry you guys have to deal with this guy, but I want to really drive the point home how propaganda works.
The price of aluminum and steel and copper has already started to rise. That could ripple through the entire manufacturing sector and raise the level of inflation. Could it bring on a recession?
So let's start again. Let's take a step back and remember inflation, right? Inflation comes from a government printing too much money. The Biden administration having a $2 trillion deficit. You don't get inflation from having a tariff, because what a tariff says is if it's made in Europe, if it's made foreign, it might cost a little more, but that which is made in America does not cost more. This concept of how about we buy American steel, we buy American aluminum. There's U.S. Steel, you know it. There's Nucor, right? There's Cleveland Cliffs. We make plenty of steel in America.
Domestic
we make plenty of
producers
steel in America. Let's strengthen that.
Domestic producers can't keep up with demand. The supply is limited, demand is strong. The price is going up.
Some foreign steel will go up for sure, but then they will build those plants in America.
These are all based in promises. It's going to happen. It's going to change. Yeah, sure, prices will go up. Again, they use that as like a flippant point. Prices are going to go up. That changes people's lives. That changes what people can buy. That changes what people can do with their lives. That changes their entire outlook on how they can operate. But they just use it as a, sure, prices will go up. But you know what? In however many years, if this works out the way that we keep having these demands work out, all these companies will move operations to the United States of America to avoid these tariffs. Who knows how long that'll take? Who gives a damn? Who cares how long these prices will continue to increase while you still try and implement other strategies of getting folks here? And what if those companies don't come here?